lost the questions. Here they are. So welcome to the 125th airhacks TV. So amazing. So 125 hours of airhacks TV roughly, maybe a little bit less. And the very first question is, it's not a question, it was this discussion with Thomas, and it was about my take on constructor injection. And I don't like constructor injections. Why? Because it's more code, and for me, it doesn't add any additional advantage. You can just do it. So you can define a constructor, put inject on the constructor, and what Quarkus will do, it will find all the dependencies and invoke for you the constructor and set the dependencies. What I prefer to do is to have package private fields which are injected. But I got a feedback that this actually invites people to directly, set the fields, because in my case they are not private, which may lead to a trouble. And so my context in answering the question is always small team, motivated developers, and this is the context, right? I would say if this is not given and you get, less motivated developers or 9-to-5 developers and more, let's say also more bureaucratic maybe, right, environment, then you could just use constructor injection. And nothing against that, it just works fine. So I don't think you need it. But if you just using, you have reasons for it, just go for it. And the only thing why I don't like it is it's more code actually, and it doesn't give me any advantage, any additional advantage in my projects. And also, developers I'm working with, they are not complaining about my coding style without constructor injection. Now, a really interesting question regarding Guava services. And this question is way too long for airhacks TV, but still interesting. So I actually opened this somewhere. Let's see where it is. It has to be here. This is from Jeremy Wall. And what it says is that the big framework, Spring Boot, Quarkus, and Micronaut, they are overloaded maybe. And they are Guava services, and there is a service manager, and what the Guava services are able to do is to start multiple services in operating system like manner. So you see here we have event boost, metric service. This is the level 1, level 2, 3, 4, 5, and I saw this before, this programming style. And I guess this at inject is Google Juice Inject, I'm assuming, because this is a Google project. And this is why I'm late, by the way, because I couldn't remember the project, but I'm pretty sure this is this. Apache Common Chain. And it was a task force. And the task force was not about the services, was about inconsistencies. But I know that in this project they use Commons Chain to have like a defined order of starting services. I'm pretty sure it was Common Chain, and I took a look and I saw that in the entire history of the project, the services just started exactly the same way. And for me, it was so okay if there is never a change and there's a defined order, we just removed the Commons Chain altogether because I wanted to eliminate, I just wanted to delete whatever we don't need and try to find, the problem as early as possible. So whatever it was suspicious, we removed that. So this was the idea back then, which worked well actually, because at the end the project was leaner, and we found the error was by the way static DAOs without synchronization. And or with synchronization, which caused a bottleneck, as far as I remember. So, and by the way, the project was interesting. It worked for years, and then they changed hardware, got more concurrency, and then it didn't survive 8 hours. So this was the part without changing the software, because the a little bit more concurrency caused all kinds of issues. So now back to so this is what I already used remove from projects. And in the Guava case, if we take a look at this, and you would just use Quarkus and Micronaut, what you could easily do is you could have a startup class with application scope startup, and whatever you inject there is forced to be initialized. So you could very easily to implement something like this with startup application scoped singleton. So this works out of the box. And if you write something like this, the question is, how often it varies. Do you encounter, configurations in your projects where you would like to just remove Redis and then a week later add Redis again? So the variability is interesting here. If it varies all the time, or you're creating a product which has to be highly adaptable, then maybe it is a good idea to use Guava services. But let's take a look. This is what I forgot actually to do. So we have the Guava. Let's see. Where is the Guava? Here is the Guava explained. And okay, service explained, but as you can see, this is from 2020, which is not a problem. What interests me, as always, is the commits and the contributors and the activity in the projects. So this is the entire Guava with the collections, and I think the services are part of it. I don't think this is a dedicated repository, but let's wait a second. Hang tight. And I'm really curious about the latest data, but if it's crunching that long, it was not called that often. This is my experience with the contributions. So what I would like to find out is how popular the entire project is, because it is a little bit dangerous, because this I didn't knew have to admit the Guava services before. I knew the chain, and I'm always try to use popular frameworks, and it's actually active. So at least something happens here in 2024. But it's the entire Guava project, not only the services, and so it doesn't look bad actually. I expected less activity. So this is actually the project is gaining momentum, and the Mr. Pavlik, member of Google, is hyperactive. So it seems like Google invests in Guava. But also what we see is that actually only the Mr. Pavlik from Google is active. All other developers are not that active. And this is Google, and this is not a Googler. And not Googler did, okay, 46 commits is still fine. But as you can see, the majority of work is done by the Mr. Chris Pavlik, and the question would be, boost factor, right? When Chris leaves Google, what happens then? This would be interesting, as always. But it looks really healthy right now. Okay, so my take on it is I would use Micronaut or Quarkus or Helidon before we use Google Guava and services, because less known, and I don't need the operating system like flexibility. Also, so this is really interesting question. So back to the explanation. So Redis services and so forth. So I'm spending my time right now in 100% the cloud, actually, public cloud, and mostly on AWS, is because this is how the project constellation is, and all my projects are serverless. So interestingly, whatever you mention here, for instance, Event Boost service. So we are using EventBridge, and I'm not booting EventBridge, it is already there. Metrics service, we use CloudWatch metrics, they are already there. MySQL, if I would use MySQL, it would be RDS service. I don't need to boot it because I would just use JDBC. I don't use Redis, but Redis is also available. Just, you can say I would like to have Redis, and I get Redis. Streaming, we use actually not a streaming, but we use SNS and SQS, and we could use we will use properly DynamoDB streams. And now we are using DynamoDB streams in one project, and we are not using Kinesis right now, but use MSK, which is Kafka basically, which is also already booted by the cloud. So what you are doing with this, you are building your own small cloud, which is fine, but it's the opposite architecture what I have already right now. So this is why this is so interesting, because you would like, to load everything in a particular order. And what I have my Lambda Quarkus and eject my business logic. There is no infrastructure, and I'm just relying on services somewhere in the cloud. Now the question is there a way to implement subgroups? Subgroups, is it a role or okay, this is the group but the group in Jakarta, to my knowledge, is mapped to a role, right? On servers. Well, I remember the role-based access control. The group in Jakarta was always mapped one-to-one to role. It doesn't have to, but it usually was. And how to call get principal with subgroups then? You don't call get principal on subgroups. You call get principal on the context. But wait a second. What you are referring to is this Jakarta EE auth, right? This was the spec. Jakarta authentication. And let's see whether we find here the HTML. And June 4th. Group. Not expert group, rather than group principal callback, which could be already interesting. And let's see whether we can find the group definition. Server auth, subprofile. Maybe we will find role. Exactly were the role mappings, and this was the mapping between the group and role. And is there sub role, whether they mention even subgroup? Subprofile. So there is no mention. The role has also been filtered by regions. So if you are in regions like AWS regions, right? And the Jakarta E is in one region. So why I'm a bit confused is usually if you are in the cloud, the roles are already there, like IAM roles, right? And you can define your IAM roles, but a role is a role. They are not sub-roles, to my knowledge. And every role has permissions. And what you can do, you can, of course, get a JSON Web Token. And in the JSON Web Token, we have principal with groups, I guess, right? This is the principal, and there are groups, and the groups are mapped to roles. But there is no notion of sub-roles or sub-groups. So we will have to ask Mr. Times, Aryan Times. So maybe you can join Discord, the airhacks Discord, and we can have discussion there with Aryan Times. I'm not sure what we would like to do. But maybe what you are searching for is not sub-roles, right? What you are searching for maybe is permissions, a hierarchical permissions. So what we did, we mapped in our project path to permissions. So it was like authorization, but there was only one role. So you can map groups, or So there is in classic Java E or Jakarta E. So there was you had just the you had the roles. Yeah, now I'm confused. And groups, and there and the server. So this was like a generic or abstract concept in Jakarta E. You had I think roles. There was roles, exactly, roles allowed and the principal, and they were mapped to groups, I think, from application server. So there was some principal, and the principal belonged to a group, and this could be hierarchical, but you had to map the role to a group. And there was at the end, most application servers are very pragmatic and say, okay, there's a one-to-one relation between the role in the spec and the group defined on the server. So this is, but the subgroup is, I don't know. So we will do some research. And you say filtered by regions, the groups filtered by regions. What you always can do, of course, you can create your own hierarchy with a dot notation, for instance, and filter it by yourself. So this would work, but I'm not sure. There was a quick search in the spec. This spec is very new, so this is the June of 24th, and I couldn't find a sub notion of something. Okay, now Mr. Kuharczyk, and this is Thomas, and he asked also interesting question. So, and this is why the show was delayed. So he's actually responsible for show delay because there was a NetBeans company. This was actually an interesting story. We had a chat of Java 1 about what you could do, and they took the idea and created a product of it. And the name of the company, as I remember, was IRD or similar. And they were able to generate from HTML or they built a library for PDF generation, a good one. So, and this is not listed here. But there's like Apache FOP. Apache FOP is still around. It's very interesting. This is FOP steht. It stands for Formatting Objects. And what you can do, you have XML like dialect, and an XSLT style sheet which generates PDF. And the problem was it was not highly controllable. So in some projects there were page numbers were hard sometimes and stuff like that. So it was not the pixel perfect notion was a little bit hard. Jasper reports, I was curious, is still around, and what you forgot to mention is BERT. This is the Business Intelligent Report tool from Eclipse, and is also still alive. You see, this is a release from 2024 June, and this is also I use sometimes in projects, and so it also worked well. So you could even define SQLite queries which were mapped to the widgets. This looked actually good and very good. This was the Apache FOP project we mentioned earlier. What I remember back then, it consumed a lot of memory and it was a bit slow, but it also happened a lot. This is the iText library, which is also used a lot. It was also PDF box, I remember, right? PDF box, Apache PDF box, also a Java library. Also available. So take a look at the PDF box. So I remember iText and PDF box both were used in projects, and so this was the Apache Commons chain. This was the BERT intelligent library and reporting library. And let's see, what is the look and feel? Do they have some images? Exactly was data sources and data sets, so you could define the SQL queries. What I'm trying to find is some screenshots. No screenshots, a pity. It was actually well integrated. It was Eclipse plugin. It was well integrated to Eclipse. So get started. They should have at least one picture. Some pretty pictures would be cool. So it looked okay. So this was iText. Then Jasper reports was huge actually, and this basically was. So now you ask me. So I always said we did, and now the question is no, why not now? because the landscape changed. So before the pandemic, shortly before the pandemic, I also worked with some startups, and they also asked me questions, how to have an easy report and how to generate PDF. And what we started to do back then, we misused Chrome for it. So what we used Chrome Puppeteer, I think. Almost right. And what you can do with the Puppeteer, you can remotely control, or not remotely. You can, somehow remotely control Chrome, which runs locally on your machine. And we defined the HTML page using, for instance, servlets, Java server pages, or you could use Quarkus Qt, for instance. And then with the Puppeteer, it generated PDF for us, which was perfect. Oh, perfect. This is the same capability Chrome has, right? So this worked really good. And so this was the one thing. So, and currently, I also got one assignment to create somehow of reporting on metrics. And what we will probably do is to pre-calculate all the metrics in business logic in Java, expose a REST endpoint, and then have a very simple widgets which will visualize the data. And in the past, also before the pandemic, we used the data-driven documents, JavaScript library, the data-driven D3GS, exactly. And this is very rich, but somehow hard to use library, but you can go crazy with it. So there are beautiful charts, and this is, it looks like that. There is a plain JavaScript which we embedded in web components, and also a nice way to implement dashboards. But the reports I know, like BERT, there was like a mix of SQL, SQL, and widgets. What we did is more like visualizing time series data, which we fetch from the backend. Yeah. So this is what like my focus in last years. So we assumed we will have a presentation layer which is nice, and the business logic was in the backend, and the reporting tools back then were used because the business department wanted to define their own reports, like back then Crystal reports, and this was the Java's answer to Crystal reports and all the reporting libraries back then. I hope, Thomas, I answered your question. Now the next one is also very interesting. Thomas, is about long-running actions. And the long-running actions, so we can close that, we can close this, and the long-running actions is based on a standard called web service, or this was actually an Oasis standard. Oasis. And it was one, and or WS, and Mark Little from Red Hat also worked on that. It was related, but there's one. So micro-profile long-running actions is based on a web service standard, and the web service standards use SOAP, and micro-profile uses REST services for it. And we have, of course, Airhacks FM, a podcast about that, about long-running actions. And that's, this is the WSLRA Oasis. Let's see. This was the standard. Yes. This is the standard. This is the web service long-running actions. So if you would like to know more about and the long-running actions with Daniel Katz, friend of the show. So Thomas asked me what to do and should we use it or should we not use it. So the long-running actions is well integrated to Quarkus and OpenLiberty, for instance. So if you need it, I wouldn't implement it by myself. Just use it because it ships out of the box. The downside or problem with it is the coordinator is a single point of failure. But I mean, it is single point of failure, but it persists everything to database. Like you could say, Hibernate is single point of failure. But yeah. And so I never used that in production, but sometimes we used workflows, and this was something different. This was something like Cogito. And Cogito, or Cogito is hard to say what it is. It is a cloud native wrapper around JBPM, and this is what I use a lot, JBPM, or a lot. There were some requirements. Java Business Process Management, which is based on BPM and DMN decision management notation, I think. And for similar reasons, so the killer feature of JBPM and or Camunda, for instance, also very popular in Europe. And why we use that is because of long-running transactions, actually. So in this particular case, you can say I'm calling a service or I'm ordering something. And if the confirmation doesn't happen within 8 hours, I will cancel automatically the order. And this is a typical case for such a business process or a workflow, which is hard to, you could implement this by yourself, but this is a matter of just like a state machine, which is persistent to changing, an XML. There's a built-in editor in Visual Studio Code. There are 2 editors for the decision-making language and the business process language. And I think Optaplanner is also part of the Cogito. And back then, we used the JBPM with JBoss. Exactly. And this JBPM is well integrated to JBoss, and Quarkus has this is the decision management. And Drules, of course, Drules is part of that. And Drules is like almost like AI service where there are rules and they are executed according to a RETI algorithm behind the scenes. It is optimized, and you get the optimized solution. And so long story short, what I will do, Thomas, I lost my tab. And got it again. So if you say, okay, I can do it in 1 hour or 1 hour, 1 day, and it will not change a lot, I will implement it by myself. But if the business process changes a lot, maybe Cogito. If you have to coordinate lots of REST services and you need compensative transactions, for instance, is also a part of the LRAs, then use long-running actions, right? This is always a trade-off. How fast can I implement something? And, if it's, because if you implement something by yourself, you will bump to the same problems that the others had. The difference is you own everything and you can fix it, right? If you're depending on library and it will die, which I don't think is a case of it, because it is already used in OpenLiberty, Quarkus, and the others, then you have a larger problem. Then you have to implement everything by yourself. So hard choice. I would say Cogito and Camunda is more popular in enterprise projects than LRA. And LRA is more barebone, on the others are higher level business process solutions. Okay, and the same answer actually in services. What I will understand, back to Mr. Jeremy Wall. So I would say I would understand if you would say I don't like Quarkus, I don't like Helidon or Spring Boot, what you mentioned, or Micronaut. So then I will implement it with plain Java SE, with, for instance, Java modules and service locator. Not service locator. Service loader. Service locator was the pattern, and service loader is the Java class. So if you say I'm just using service loader, and I can and then this is what NetBeans did, for instance, and using Java modules, then I will fully understand use. Okay, I have very fast solution. I control everything, but I would prefer Micronaut or Quarkus over Guava services. This is my personal feeling. I did a lot of research with Guava services, but if you would say I can implement everything by in one day using service loader and JPMS, or without JPMS, just service loader, and this is very simple application without any dependencies, I'm all for it. So if I can, I use Java SE plain before I use Micronaut or Quarkus. But yeah, but if you use dependency injection, I think it cannot be any easier than with Quarkus. Yeah, so we had that. PDF box, Puppeteer covered, long-running actions covered, and there are one huge announcement actually. Okay, there will be two others workshops. So there were already summer workshops. Forgot what it was. One was about persistence, and one was about serverless AI. And I plan in December 2 airhacks live workshops. Single table design with Java, so just focusing on DynamoDB and Cassandra, maybe Apache Cassandra, but only on the two databases, and we'll fully focus just on single table design, how to map relations between Java objects to NoSQL databases. And the other one will be cloudless workshop. We'll just focus on Java, maybe mention a bit the cloud, but focus on Java LLMs, how to work with LLMs and integrate the LLMs. And now comes the announcement actually. And December 12th, I'm pretty sure, I will actually organize a workshop at Airport Munich. So back to the airport, and I will announce it yet. I will just try to get a nice room again. There will be the Christmas market or winter market again. So lots of fun, and so it means I will do the LLM Gen AI Java Bootstrap at the Airport Munich first, and then 1 week later, online. And the registrations for the live events are open, but are not open for the workshop at Munich Airport, but I will open this soon. Okay, now, Drive Those. Nice name, by the way. I have a question. How can implement database switching in runtime with Spring Boot application? So I have to admit, I never implemented a Spring Boot application, so I have to answer no idea. But database switching at runtime. But what I know, for instance, if you're using AWS Aurora, they have JDBC wrapper which does it for you. So if you're in the cloud, it just works on JDBC level. And on Quarkus, how this would work is database switching. Data is the question how you use the database. But let's say database implies you are using JDBC, maybe plain. So you can inject multiple JDBC connections, and depending on some external event, you can easily use the one or the other. So this is not a problem. Problematic is if you are using Hibernate, Eclipse Link, or similar, then internally they are using the connection, so you will have to switch between the databases. And I'm assuming they are in different state, I guess, right? Or if you're in the cloud, the problem is solved because you have RDS proxy, and you will have, you know, to switch between the databases because of DNS changes. And if you search for Aurora serverless and driver wrapper, you will find it, or you will have to implement it by yourself. So it doesn't work out of the box. Maybe it works in Spring Boot, I have no idea, but in Quarkus case, Quarkus doesn't know anything about persistence, so you have to choose Panache or Hibernate or JPA or plain JDBC, and then switching between databases means actually means switching the connections underneath your OR mapper, right? So not a big deal. The problem is, of course, if there is a data in cache and the transaction is not committed yet, and you switch the database, then it will flush to database. But the question is this the same state? You will get optimistic lock exceptions maybe, right? Okay. Again, we can, if you like, join, you know, the Discord, and you can ask there, but maybe someone in Discord also knows about Spring Boot. I assume so. But for me, I'm using right now Quarkus only in the backend. Sometimes Helidon, in rare cases Micronaut, never use Spring Boot. Why not? Because in serverless, because of my history. So I was coming from application servers, and the Quarkus is 100% compatible with application servers back then, so we can very easily migrate the code. And right now we need something with very quick startup times. So either I use Quarkus or Micronaut or nothing, plain Java SE, to save money. And Spring Boot boots slower. Exactly. If there is a boot in the name, it has to be a bit slower, right? So just kidding, no, sorry. Okay, now, so this was that. We covered this, and what we didn't cover is almost the most important thing of the entire show. And it was the almost forgotten, was the time traveling. And as I created the blog post, I listened to the 25th airhacks TV 8 years ago, and it was actually amazing how similar the questions were to now. So EJB versus CDI, what is the future? This was back then. What happened right now? EJBs, I don't use them anymore, not because they are bad, but rather than EJBs EJBs are the Lambda, right? So I use Lambda everywhere, and this is almost identical to EJBs, and inside the Lambda I use CDI. So and Lambda has process scaling model, so one request, one process, and EJBs were the same actually, one request, one EJB, but the server was multi-threaded. Boundary control entity component visibility. I get still the questions. So now I have multiple components. Which layer can talk to which other layer? Still a thing, but I get less and less question because it's very natural right now. So again, what is boundary control entity? Is a way of organizing applications, and the idea is you have a package, Java package, and the top packages have business meaning, domain meaning, so they have nice names. And every package is structured the same way. Boundary is, you know, the API to the outside world. Control is reusable pieces, usually Java classes injected. And the entity are the domain objects, are the domain entities. And the components can just talk to each other. So there is no strict visibility rules. But of course, stuff inside the component has to talk more than between components. So maximal cohesion, minimal coupling. Okay, when to use suspended and execute a service. So suspended, back then it was, or right now, is an annotation in JAX-RS. And interestingly, I don't use it anymore a lot because we got Project Loom, right? So you can just block and it mostly works. And what I also do not use is the Quarkus reactive programming style, because we got Loom, which is very good. And now look at this. The question, how to implement a long-running task. which we answered 8 years later, right? So you see, airhacks.tv, if you ask me a question, 8 years later, you get the answer. With different framework, but at least you get the answer, right? Also interesting, JavaScript. Back then, 8 years ago, I got a question, ES 2015, 2016, or TypeScript. And so what happened right now, I use JavaScript exclusively, just JavaScript, no TypeScript, and I also not use Angular anymore, just web components. And more and more components, more and more developers are happy with building single-page applications without any external frameworks. So how to start a web project? This changed a bit, or not, because Angular 2 is already mentioned. So Quarkus is the backend with REST services. We don't use GraphQL a lot, and the web application accesses the backend. But having said that, I think we will see revival of backend template engines in Java, something like JSP, but leaner. So, for instance, there is a Quarkus Qt already, a nice template library. There, I think JSF is already running on Quarkus again, because this is also what the JavaScript community decided to do, to have server-side rendering. So is JMX still useful? It is, because let's say Kafka or, for instance, Apache Cassandra, they have lots of monitoring, lots of metrics available via JMX, and you can expose them to your, to your service of your choice. So entities, rich or anemic, also interesting, because what I'm using a lot right now, I'm using Java records, which are anemic per default at the beginning, but they are getting more and more methods. So over time, they become richer and richer. So my Java records are quite rich, and they are able to serialize to JSON, deserialize from, or create themselves from JSON, have validations. So they are quite rich, but no more classes rather than records. Correlation IDs in JAX-RS, which are actually a long-running action. So you see, so we also discussed that. Okay, ears are dead. I didn't use ears even back then. So I think starting in 2006, Java E 6, yes, I always used wars. MVC, is it too late in Java E? Also funny questions, right? Because it is there, but it's not used a lot, I would say. Dependency injection in sub-resources. This one doesn't lost importance somehow. So what sub-resources in JAX-RS are, is you have main resource, let's say customers, then ID and addresses would be the sub-resource, and you could return the sub-resource via JAX-RS, but then the dependency injection wouldn't work there. So what I see the projects doing instead of that is they have more endpoints on the main JAX-RS endpoint. On the main JAX-RS class resource. And what I tend to do is I have more JAX-RS classes on the same level, which also are mapped to the sub-resources. Checkpoints and persistence. So the batch checkpoints, we had to implement checkpoints actually, but not with JBatch, but still a thing, of course. What is the benefit of a thread pool? Interestingly, it turned out that the thread pools could also be bad for the performance. Because if you start threads in advance, they are consuming resources. So the application works most smoothly if all threads are consumed. So, but the idea is that starting threads is expensive, and which is actually was solved with Project Loom, right? Because this is very cheap to start new threads. So I would say it is Loom also got impact on thread pool. Also interesting, PHP to Java E migration. So lots of projects were migrated already, and I had some PHP developers on the airhacks workshops, and they were always, positively impressed, or they were impressed how productive and nice Java actually is. And microservice, I didn't use actually microservice a lot. I just named something microservice. If you see my old talks from conferences, I actually had, maybe 5 independent applications, and in a bigger projects, and we called that microservices, and this basically was. So how can we use LLM to create a system that I trained on our specific application? I can answer questions based solely on that data. Solely on the data. So what you can do is, I don't know whether you're aware of Llama 3 Java. Yeah, this was wrong. So take a look at that. This is not solely on the system. It is. It uses Llama 3 and is offline. For instance, you can use and then you can you can fine tune it, right? So this one, the another one, deepnets.com, I hope. Yes. This one is a pure Java system which you can train completely. It ships even with a IDE, which helps you with the training, and then you get a jar, and it is yours. Yeah, this would work. And what I'm using right now a lot is Bedrock, and it is not what you are requesting, but the interesting part is that AWS says data doesn't leave the network, so they don't use your data for training. And I'm actually don't care what Amazon says, because my clients has contract with AWS, and if we are allowed to use Bedrock, we use Bedrock. If we are not allowed to use Bedrock, we are not using Bedrock. But what you get is an API, a JSON-like HTTP API, and you can call Bedrock, and you can also fine-tune things. But if you train your model from scratch, you won't get ChatGPT, right? Because you will have to spend millions of dollars. So this is not viable. What you can do is, for instance, you can fine-tune a Llama model, for instance, or whatever you like, a Claude. But I think the fine-tuning will still cost you, I don't know, $10,000 to $30,000, which is still a lot. So instead of fine-tuning, I would suggest use techniques like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, I think, where you can mix the power of the LLM with your own data. So this is the interesting without any fine-tuning. So I think the fine-tuning is getting less and less interesting. And what we get is more and more integration with enterprise systems. And we are using a foundational model like Llama 3, or I use Claude a lot, for instance, the Anthropic Claude, Sonnet 3.5 right now. And we are using them to have, you know, the for formatting JSON output and CSV, for instance, right? And also you're asking answer. So the challenge is integrating such a model is not that it answers in plain text, rather than it should act as an API. So this is actually in my projects, the LLM behaves like a microservice. Okay, drive those cool questions. So thank you. I think we are done, right? We covered a lot. I'm slow with the so pre-announcement. The next Airhacks FM podcast will be with Cliff Click and we will discuss how the hotspot VM happened. And yeah, this is that's all. So I would say thank you for watching and asking questions. See you in projects, Airhacks Live, listen to podcasts. And one thing, interestingly, in the 25th episode at the beginning, I mentioned we have 3,000 subscribers. And I checked that we have almost 30,000 on YouTube, which is incredible. So there are 30,000 YouTube subscribers on my channel. And what also happens, I have a daily Java shorts, and they are getting also more and more popular. And I think I have already 500, more than 500. 500 were last year, I think. Well, I would say 600 roughly Java shorts, or 1 minute with Java on completely various and chaotic topics. So, thank you for watching. See you next month. Bye.